Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling two massive, deeply interconnected topics in innovation management: organizational culture and innovation process and design. We're going to transform innovation from what a lot of people think is just this chaotic, magical, aha moment into a highly structured, repeatable capability. We'll do this by looking at exactly how the human behavioral environment, basically your culture, interacts directly with your disciplined execution, which is your process. Think of it as mastering both the engine and the steering wheel of your organization.
So let's dive right in with a pretty relatable question. Have you ever watched a brilliant, game-changing idea just die a slow, painful death in a maze of corporate bureaucracy? Or on the flip side, maybe you've witnessed what we call prototype theater, where a team builds this beautiful, highly polished product that, well, absolutely no customer actually wants. The reason this happens is almost always a disconnect between the ideas a company generates and the structured culture and process required to actually deliver them to the real world.
We're going to explore this through 6 key areas today. First, the RICP innovation system. Then, the culture of innovation, followed by diagnosing hidden cultural signals. After that, we'll hit designing the innovation process, the 7 stages to market launch, and finally, connecting culture and process.
Now, a crucial starting point is establishing what innovation actually is. A lot of organizations get totally stuck here because they think a cool idea is an innovation, but it's not. Innovation actually equals invention plus implementation. An idea might become a workable concept, sure, but true innovation demands actual adoption and meaningful value. Literally, if your customers aren't using it and valuing it, you haven't innovated. You've just invented something.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the RICP innovation system, which stands for Resources, Infrastructure, Culture, and Process. The reality is, innovation only succeeds when organizations align these 4 interdependent elements. First off, you have resources, so that's your capacity, your skills, your funding. Second is infrastructure, which is your governance and direction. Third is culture, the shared assumptions and behaviors of your team. And fourth is process, meaning the repeatable paths from a raw opportunity to a fully adopted outcome. You absolutely need all 4. I mean, think about it. If you have amazing resources but terrible infrastructure, those resources are just going to get trapped in silos.
And here is the kicker. RICP is multiplicative, not additive. If you have a 0 in your culture, like, say, a widespread fear of speaking up or reporting bad news to the boss, it simply doesn't matter how much money or highly structured process you throw at it. Anything multiplied by 0 is literally 0. The whole system just falls apart. Moving right along to Section 2, the culture of innovation and how shared meaning shapes behavior. To truly wrap our heads around culture, we can look at 5 cultural dimensions that heavily influence behavior. And to be clear, we use these as analytical lenses, not as stereotypes for individuals, right? So take power distance, for example. In a culture with really high power distance, people might be terrified to challenge senior leaders. If a junior engineer spots a fatal flaw in a big project, are they actually going to speak up? Or consider uncertainty avoidance. Does your team completely panic when faced with ambiguity, or do they embrace small, reversible tests to figure things out? These underlying dimensions completely shape an organization's willingness to experiment.
Let's jump into Section 3, diagnosing hidden cultural signals and moving beyond official values. This is all about looking at the daily signals and the cultural web of an organization to see what is actually rewarded. There is no single correct culture for innovation, and the competing values framework proves exactly that. Early exploration actually benefits heavily from an adhocracy culture, which is all about experimentation and flexibility, or a clan culture that builds deep, deep trust among the team. But when it's finally time to scale a product globally and safely, you actually need the strict reliability and rules of a hierarchy culture. So the real trick here is cultural ambidexterity. It's about shifting your behavioral mix to perfectly fit the work at hand. We can actually see this in action by contrasting 3M and Apple. 3M is famous for broad exploration, giving employees tons of autonomy and using distributed coordination. But then look at Apple. They're known for really strong centralized selection, super tight strategic direction, and integrated control. And guess what? Both are incredibly successful. This contrast shifts our whole mindset from trying to find some magical cultural silver bullet to instead seeking strict alignment between your specific culture and your specific business strategy. All right, Section 4, Designing the Innovation Process, taking us from ideas to adopted outcomes. Innovation processes have totally evolved over time, which is famously captured by Rothwell's 5 generations. Early on, companies just relied on technology push, basically inventing a cool piece of tech and just crossing their fingers that someone wanted to buy it. Then came demand pull, where you actually ask customers what they want. Today, though, the most mature organizations use integrated and network models. They often rely on stage-gate perspectives to coordinate work across both external partners and internal teams. Doing this makes uncertainty visible while balancing that necessary discipline with the adaptability you absolutely need for learning. Now, a crucial point here is knowing the exact tools to use during this process. A really critical distinction to make is the difference between a model and a prototype. A model communicates form and style. It simply answers the question, what might this look like? It doesn't even have to function. A prototype, however, tests function and risk. It answers the hard question, will this actually work? A super common mistake is building an incredibly expensive, polished model and then treating it as proof that the business case is viable. You have to always know exactly what uncertainty you are trying to reduce. That brings us to Section 5, 7 Stages to Market Launch, which is an idealized learning progression.
This journey begins with Stage 1, deep customer empathy and insight. We have to ask, are we solving a real problem here? Then we move through development and design, rigorously testing our prototypes. By the time we hit Stage 4, production engineering, we're constantly asking if the solution not only appeals to users, but also remains affordable and, frankly, physically possible to produce at scale. Step by step, we are slowly replacing our assumptions with actual hard evidence.
As we cross over into the real world, the stakes definitely get higher. Stage 5 is pilot testing, Stage 6 is full-scale deployment, and Stage 7 is the actual market launch. These final stages shift the fundamental question from, can this work just once in a lab, to, can it work repeatedly, safely, and economically in the messy real world? And this is key. Innovation absolutely does not stop at launch. Post-launch learning is where you monitor adoption, fix any unintended consequences, and ultimately renew the entire cycle. Finally, we've reached Section 6, Connecting Culture and Process through the Behavioral Execution Loop. Think about this dynamic for a second. Culture without process is really just energy without delivery. You end up with a bunch of happy, creative people generating walls of sticky notes that never actually turn into products. But on the flip side, process without culture is just compliance without learning. You might have rigid stage gates, but everyone is too terrified to report their failures, so they literally just fake the data. The takeaway here is that early stage work needs flexible solutions but highly disciplined learning. Meanwhile, late stage work needs disciplined delivery but the flexibility to keep improving. And this right here is exactly why psychological safety is non-negotiable. Leaders have to distinguish intelligent failure from outright negligence. An intelligent failure happens in uncertain territory. It's small, it's bounded, and it produces really useful learning. Negligence, on the other hand, is just ignoring known safety standards. If leadership treats an intelligent failure the exact same way they treat negligence, which is usually with punishment, they instantly create a culture of fear. Your people will completely stop taking risks, and your entire innovation process will just grind to a halt. To wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at your current projects and fill in this blank. This innovation will fail if blank is not true. Whatever that answer is, it reveals the exact next experiment you need to run. But the real difficult question is this. Does your organization's culture actually reward the person who uncovers that truth, even if it completely kills the project? If you can master that balance, you will master innovation. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.